The Dragon King bought Ashara veil with 3 bars of black gold.
We have to get out
and a
of here.
promise that she would not survive the night. That was the price of a wolfless girl in the border markets of Vey. Not a daughter, not a bride,
You have
not
been
even a
chosen.
servant worth naming
I am
with
yours
care.
to command.
Just a body with
Rise
ash
and claim
in her
your
blood,
destiny.
sold under moonlight while wolf merchants counted coin and pretended they were not relieved to see her leave. They dragged her into the mountain court of Dravenfall barefoot, wrists bound in burned red cord, her plain grey dress torn at the hem from the climb through volcanic stone. The throne hall was carved into the living side of a black mountain, its walls veined with fire, its ceiling open to a strip of storm-dark sky. Dragon banners hung from iron beams above the court, but no dragon moved beneath them. Only statues, only bones, only dead eggs, sealed in glass cases, like royal shame. Every noble watched her enter. Every wolf envoy smelled her and sneered. No wolf, no scent of beast, no moon call beneath her skin. Ashara had heard those judgments since childhood. She had stood under full moons while other children shifted and ran, while her own body remained painfully human. She had been made to drink bitter root, bleed into silver bowls, sleep beside wolf hides, and kneel before pack healers who told her the same thing every time. Empty. But emptiness had never felt empty to Ashara. It felt hot, buried, as if something under her ribs had been turned to ash before it could become flame. At the far end of the hall, Dragon King Kyle Draven sat on a throne of black iron and carved horn. He was younger than Ashara expected, and more dangerous than the stories had promised. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark armor that reflected the mountain fire, with black hair falling in loose waves near his sharp face and pale gold eyes that looked as if they had not known sleep in years. A thin crown of dragon bone rested across his brow, but the true crown was the silence around him. No one moved without weighing his breath first. He looked at Ashara once, not kindly, not cruelly, as if she were a blade he had purchased without knowing which direction it would cut. Beside him stood Lord Valor Sith, the king's uncle, dressed in white priest-regent robes threaded with gold. His face was elegant, weathered, and calm in the way old poison was calm. He held a black ledger in one hand and a ritual knife in the other. "The tribute is delivered," Valor announced. "Ashara veil of the wolf border, wolfless, unclaimed, no living pack bond, blood tested under ash rites." Ashara's jaw tightened. Tribute. That was a prettier word than purchase. Kyle's eyes remained on her. "Who sold her?" The wolf envoy behind Ashara bowed. "Her pack elders, Your Majesty. She has no wolf, no marriage value, no battle use. We were told your court had need of ash blood." Kael's gaze flicked to Valor. A small silence passed between king and uncle. Then Kael said, "Need is not the same as permission." Valor smiled faintly. "The law permits purchase of unclaimed blood for vault rights when the crown line is endangered." Ashara's stomach turned cold. Vault rights. So the whispers were true. Dravenfall did not buy her to serve. They bought her to bleed. Valor gestured toward the center of the hall, where a circular altar rose from the black glass floor. Upon it sat a dragon egg larger than Ashara's head, dark as burned bone, wrapped in ancient gold chains. Its shell was cracked in places, but lifeless, dull, and cold. Around the altar, 7 smaller eggs rested in silver bowls, all gray, all dead. "The last egg of the first dragon queen," Valor said, voice growing reverent. "Stone for 1,000 years. The old texts say ash, blood, opens what dragon fire cannot. If the girl's blood answers, the vault beneath the altar will open." "And if it does not?" Kael asked. Valor did not look at Ashara. "Then the mountain will take what is owed." The court understood. Ashara understood too. Her life was not the price of failure. It was the fuel. Kale leaned forward slightly. Does she understand the rite? Velor's smile thinned. Understanding is not required from blood. Ashara heard herself speak before fear could stop her. It is usually required from people. The hall went still. A wolf envoy hissed under his breath. One noblewoman covered her mouth, delighted by the danger. Velor turned toward Ashara slowly, as if noticing for the first time that the object he had purchased had a voice. Kael's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened. Velor stepped closer. You are alive, because this court has use for you. Ashara lifted her chin. Her heart was slamming so hard she thought the whole mountain might hear it. Then be honest enough to say that when you kill me. A murmur moved through the court. Kael stood. The sound of his armor shifting silenced everyone. He descended the throne steps with controlled, predatory grace, stopping several feet from Ashara. Up close, he looked less like a king carved from legend and more like a man holding himself together by force. There were faint black veins beneath the skin at his throat, like burned cracks under marble. His right hand, half hidden beneath a gauntlet, trembled once before he curled it into a fist. Ashara saw it. So did Velor. The regent priest's eyes narrowed. Kael noticed Ashara noticing. You are not afraid enough. I am afraid, she said. I am only tired of performing it for people who already bought my death. Something moved in his face. A fracture. Gone quickly. Velor cut in. Your Majesty, the moon is rising. The vault must be opened before the lower fire turns. Kael looked at the dead egg. Begin. The word landed inside Ashara, like a door locking. Two guards seized her arms and pulled her toward the altar. She did not fight, not because she accepted it, but because she had learned the shape of useless resistance. The court wanted spectacle. She would not give them panic as well. They forced her to her knees before the black egg. Velor lifted the ritual knife. Kael watched from beside the altar, his jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Ashara looked at him and hated that she wanted something from him. Not rescue. She was not foolish enough for that. But hesitation. One crack in the coldness. One sign that the man who had bought her could still see the difference between a girl and a key. His eyes met hers. For one heartbeat, he looked as if he might speak. Then Velor cut her palm. Pain flashed bright and clean. Ashara's blood welled dark red, then strangely black at the edges, as if ash had dissolved inside it. Velor grabbed her wrist and forced her hand over the dead dragon egg. Let the mountain take what remains, he whispered. Her blood fell. One drop struck the shell. Nothing happened. A few nobles exhaled in disappointment. Velor's grip tightened, ready to cut deeper. Then the egg moved. Not cracked. Moved. A sound came from inside it. Small, sharp, alive. The entire court froze. The gold chains around the egg snapped one by one. Fire leaked through the cracks in the black shell. Not red, not gold, but white ash flame, soft and terrible. Ashara tried to pull back, but the egg rolled toward her bleeding hand, as if it knew her touch. Kael stepped forward, shock breaking across his face. Impossible. Velor went pale. The shell split. A tiny black claw pushed through. The court screamed. Ashara could not move as the dead dragon egg, silent for 1,000 years, cracked open in her hands. A newborn dragon, no larger than a wolf pup, spilled into her lap. Black-scaled, trembling, its wet wings streaked with silver ash. Its eyes opened slowly, one gold, one white. It looked past Velor, past the court, past the Dragon King himself, straight at Ashara. Then it pressed its small, horned head against her bloody palm and made a sound like a broken bell remembering music. Kael stared at the creature, as if his throne had just become dust beneath him. Vaela whispered, "Kill it." The newborn dragon lifted its head. White fire bloomed around Ashara's body, and every dead egg in the throne hall began to crack. The first crack sounded like a bone breaking inside the mountain. Then another. Then another. All around the throne hall, the dead dragon eggs began to split inside their silver bowls. Nobles screamed and scrambled backward from the altar. Wolf envoys dropped to their knees. Guards lifted spears with shaking hands, but no one dared step close enough to strike. The air filled with white ash flame, drifting upward like sparks from a funeral pyre that had suddenly remembered life. Ashara knelt at the center of it all, with the newborn dragon in her lap. It was impossibly small compared to the terror it had created. Its black scales still shone wet from the shell. Its silver ash wings trembled against her torn dress. One tiny claw gripped her finger with desperate strength. It should have looked fragile. Instead, every dead egg in the royal hall was answering it. Lord Vaelor Sith recovered first. "Kill it!" he shouted again. The command shattered the court's frozen horror. 2 guards rushed forward with moonsteel spears. The newborn dragon hissed. Ashara moved before thought could stop her. She pulled the creature against her chest and turned her body around it, presenting her own back to the spears. She had no armor, no wolf, no magic, she understood. Only a bleeding hand, a torn dress, and the absurd instinct to protect a creature that had chosen her before anyone else had. "Stop," Kyle said. The word was quiet. The guards stopped anyway, not because they were merciful, because the Dragon King had spoken in a voice that made mercy unnecessary. Vaelor turned on him. "Your Majesty, that thing is not a hatchling. It is a vault-born curse." Kael did not look away from Ashara. His pale gold eyes were fixed on the dragon tucked against her heart, then on the white fire curling around her arms without burning her skin. "She bled on an egg you called dead," Kael said, "and it lived. That is exactly why it must die." Ashara's breath shook. She looked up at Kael, hating the hope that rose in her because he had stopped the spears once. One mercy did not make a savior. Kings stopped knives for many reasons: to question, to possess, to delay the killing until it better served a throne. The newborn dragon pressed its head under her chin. A tiny sound escaped it. Not fear, recognition. At the sound, the nearest dead egg cracked open fully. A pale claw scraped the rim of its silver bowl, then collapsed back inside, too weak to rise. Another egg split, spilling ashlight across the floor. Not all were hatching. Some were trying. Some had been dead too long. Some were only waking enough to suffer. Ashara felt it. The pain struck through her chest, sudden and unbearable. Her vision blurred. She heard tiny heartbeats, some strong, some fading, all reaching toward the blood in her palm. She gasped. Kael saw. "What is happening to her?" Vaelor's expression sharpened. "The vault is feeding." "No," Ashara whispered. Both men looked at her. She clutched the newborn dragon tighter. "They are not feeding. They are calling." Vaelor stepped toward her, voice smooth again. "Then silence them. Give the hatchling to the crown, and the others may settle." The dragon in her arms snarled weakly. Ashara looked at Vaelor's outstretched hand. The regent priest's fingers were clean, jeweled, untouched by the blood he had spilled from her palm. She realized then what terrified her most about him. Not his cruelty. Cruel men were easy to understand. It was his certainty. He did not believe he was stealing. He believed every living thing existed in degrees of usefulness to the throne. "No," she said. The hall went still. Vaelor's eyes darkened. "No?" Ashara forced herself to stand. Her knees shook. The newborn dragon clung to her, wings curled against her ribs. White ash flame slid down her arms like living silk. "You bought my blood," she said. "You did not buy what answered it." A sound moved through the court. Kael's gaze changed. Velor smiled thinly. "Blood purchased under vault law belongs to the crown. Then the law is wrong." A few nobles gasped as if she had struck the king. Kael stepped closer, slow and dangerous. "Careful." Ashara met his eyes. That word is always spoken by people standing safely behind someone else's wound. The words landed between them like a blade. Kael stopped. For a moment, the mountain fire reflected in his face, showing every hard line of him. King, weapon, prisoner of a throne built before he was born. Then his gaze dropped to her bleeding palm. "Who are you?" he asked. Ashara almost laughed, but there was no breath for it. "You have the ledger. Your uncle read it beautifully. Wolfless, unclaimed, no living pack bond. That is what they sold me. I was not aware kings cared about the difference." His jaw tightened. Before he could answer, the newborn dragon lifted its head and stared at him. Kael went rigid. Ashara felt the change before she understood it. The hatchling's gaze reached into the king like a hook beneath bone. The black veins at Kael's throat flared. He took one step back, one hand going to his chest. Velor's calm cracked. "Do not let it look at you." Too late. Kael's eyes widened, and for the first time, real pain broke through his control. A vision seemed to pass through him. Ashara could not see it fully, but she felt its edges. A woman screaming in a burning chamber, dragon eggs carried away under black cloth, a child prince held back by guards as the last living flame in the nursery was smothered. Kael staggered. The court cried out. Ashara moved toward him without thinking, still holding the hatchling. "Your Majesty." Velor seized her wrist. Pain shot through her cut palm. The hatchling screamed, not loudly. It was too small for that. But every cracked egg in the hall answered in a shrill chorus of fire and grief. The white ash flame around Ashara turned sharp. Kael's head snapped up. "Release her." Velor's grip tightened. "She is binding you. She is bleeding because of you. She is awakening what your mother died to bury." The hall froze. Kael's face went utterly still. Ashara looked between them. The newborn dragon trembled against her chest. The cracked eggs glowed brighter. Velor realized what he had said, only after the words had left him. Kael's voice came low. "What did my mother bury?" Velor released Ashara. Slowly, the regent priest drew himself upright, recovering dignity the way a snake recovered its coil. "A disaster." Kael stepped closer. "Answer me." Velor looked at the hatchling with naked hatred. "Your mother believed dragon eggs should choose their keepers. She believed the old Ashblood line had the right to stand between crown and flame. She would have broken the throne to save creatures that no longer served it. Asharas puls hamel, Ashblood." The word struck something inside her. The hatchling pressed its head to the hollow of her throat. As if answering, Kael looked at Ashara then, not as a purchased girl, not as a ritual tool, but as the center of a secret his own bloodline had tried to bury. Velor saw the shift and moved quickly. He raised the ritual knife again, this time not toward Ashara's palm, toward the hatchling. Ashara turned away. Kael drew his sword, but the newborn dragon opened its mouth first. A tiny ribbon of white fire spilled out, weak but pure. It struck the altar. The black stone split down the center. Beneath it, the ancient vault opened, not with treasure, not with weapons, with a child's lullaby sung by a dead queen. The entire throne hall heard it. Kael dropped to one knee, as if the song had cut through him. Ashara stood above the opening, shaking, the hatchling in her arms and ash fire in her blood. From inside the vault, A woman's voice whispered, "My son, do not let them kill her too." The dead queen's voice turned the throne hall into a grave. "My son, do not let them kill her too." No one moved. Not the nobles pressed against the volcanic walls. Not the wolf envoys still kneeling near the broken altar. Not the guards with their moonsteel spears half raised. Even Lord Vaelor Sith stood frozen with the ritual knife in his hand, his face stripped of its priestly calm. Dragon King Cael Draven remained on one knee before the open vault, one hand braced against the black glass floor, as if the song rising from below had broken something inside him. Ashara held the newborn dragon tighter. The hatchling's tiny claws clung to her torn dress. Its body trembled with each breath, weak from 1,000 years inside a dead shell. But when the queen's voice whispered through the vault, the little dragon lifted its head and answered with a soft cry. The sound was small. The court recoiled from it anyway. Cael looked up slowly. His pale gold eyes were no longer cold. They were shattered. "My mother is dead," he said. The vault answered with music, a lullaby, low and old, carried by ash and fire. Ashara did not know the words, but her blood did. The melody moved through her ribs, through the burn in her palm, through the strange heat she had always thought was emptiness. It felt like being remembered by someone she had never met. Vaelor recovered first. "Close the vault," he ordered. No one obeyed. His voice sharpened. "Close it," the hatchling hissed. Ash flame rose around Ashara's feet. Cael stood. The movement was slow, but it silenced the hall more completely than shouting would have. Blood had not been spilled from him, but he looked wounded all the same, as if the vault had opened a blade inside memory. He turned to Vaelor. "You told me she died sealing the last egg." Vaelor lowered the knife to his side. "She did. Then why does her voice rise from a vault you told me held only dead stone?" "Because grief echoes," Vaelor said. "Because old magic mimics what men are weak enough to miss." Ashara felt the hatchling go still. Cael did too. His face hardened. "You forget yourself." "No," Vaelor said, and for the first time, his mask cracked enough to show the man beneath the priest. Not calm, not holy, afraid. "I remember what your mother forgot. Dragons destroyed kingdoms before crowns learned to bind them. Ash bloodkeepers made beasts choose over kings. Your mother would have given every egg a will, every flame a voice, every creature the right to refuse the throne." Ashara stared at him. "And that frightened you?" Vaelor looked at her, as if he wished she had remained silent from birth. "Freedom frightens only fools who do not have to govern its consequences." Cael stepped forward. "You murdered her." The hall stopped breathing. Vaelor's mouth tightened. That was answer enough. The black veins at Cael's throat flared. Fire surged in the cracks of the mountain walls. For a moment, he looked every inch the Dragon King the border stories feared. Beautiful, terrible. A man whose grief could become a kingdom's funeral. Ashara felt the newborn dragon tense in her arms. If Cael killed Vaelor now, the court would remember blood before truth. Vaelor would become a loyal regent, slain by a grief-maddened king under the spell of a wolfless girl. The hatchling would be called corruption. Ashara would be blamed for awakening a dead queen's curse. She stepped forward. "Your Majesty." Cael did not look away from Vaelor. Ashara hated how much courage it took to speak again. If he dies now, he takes the answers with him. Cael's jaw flexed. Vaelor's eyes flicked to her. There it was again. Hatred, but deeper now. Recognition. He knew what she had done. She had not protected him out of mercy. She had denied him the quick death that would keep his secret sealed. Cael finally turned to her. The rage in his eyes did not soften, but it focused. "You would spare him?" "No," she said. "I would make him speak. The newborn dragon pressed its head to Ashara's wrist. The ash flame around her dimmed, becoming steady instead of wild. Kael looked at the creature, then at her bleeding palm. "What are you?" Ashara swallowed. "I do not know." Velor laughed once, bitter and sharp. "She is what should have stayed buried." The vault flared. A shape rose from the opening. Not a body, not fully. A woman made of ashlight and smoke, crowned with broken dragon horns, her face blurred by death and fire. The court dropped to its knees. Kael did not. He stood, utterly still. "Mother," he whispered. The queen's ghost turned toward him. Her voice filled the hall like warm embers under snow. Kael, his control broke for one breath. Only one. Ashara saw the boy inside the king, the child who had watched a nursery burn, who had been told his mother died saving a throne, who had spent years ruling beside dead eggs and colder men. Then the queen turned to Ashara. "My little ash keeper," she said. The court stirred. Ashara's heart slammed once. "Little," she whispered. The queen lifted one transparent hand. Ashara's sleeve burned away from her wrist without pain, revealing ash-gray birthmarks she had hidden all her life. They curled up her forearm like dragon smoke. "You were hidden among wolves because no dragon court would stop searching for you," the queen said. "They called you wolfless because your wolf was never meant to wake alone." The hatchling opened its one gold and one white eye. Ashara could barely breathe. "Then what am I?" Velor shouted. "Silence!" The queen's ghost did not look at him. "The last ash blood keeper," she said. "The only blood that can hatch what the crown murdered, and bind nothing by force." The cracked eggs around the hall glowed brighter. Kael looked at the dead shells, then at Velor, horror sharpening into understanding. The eggs were not dead. "No," the queen said. They were silenced. Velor raised the ritual knife and lunged not at Kael this time, at Ashara. The hatchling screamed. Kael moved, but the queen's ghost moved faster. Ashlight burst from the vault and wrapped around Velor's arm, stopping the blade inches from Ashara's chest. The entire court saw the black runes carved into his skin beneath his priestly sleeve. Egg-sealing marks, blood transfer marks, murder disguised as preservation. Velor's secret burned in full view. The nobles recoiled. Kael's voice came low. "How many?" Velor smiled through clenched teeth. "Enough to keep your throne standing." Ashara's hand shook around the hatchling. The tiny dragon turned toward Velor and opened its mouth. White flame spilled out. Not to kill him, to reveal. The fire struck the floor, and the black glass became a mirror. Inside it, the court saw Queen Eleanor Draven bleeding beside the dragon nursery, pushing one living egg into the vault, while Velor stood behind her with a blade. They saw eggs drained, marked, and displayed as dead relics. They saw a newborn Ashara carried away by a wolf midwife under cover of smoke. They saw everything. Kael did not speak. His sword slid from its sheath. With a sound like winter leaving bone, Velor stepped back. But this time, no guard stood between them. Ashara held the newborn dragon against her heart, while every dead egg in the hall trembled, waiting. And then, from beneath the altar, a second egg began to hatch. The second egg cracked in the center of the throne hall. No one screamed this time. They had passed beyond screaming. The court watched in stunned silence as the black shell trembled inside its silver bowl, thin lines of white ash fire spreading across its surface. The first hatchling in Ashara's arms lifted its small head and cried toward it. The sound was fragile, desperate, and fierce, like a life calling another life back from the edge of death. Ashara took one step toward the egg. Velor moved at the same time. Kael's sword touched his throat, before the regent priest could reach her. "Do not," the Dragon King said. Vaelor froze, but his eyes remained fixed on the cracking shell. "You have no idea what you are allowing." Kael's voice was quiet. "I know exactly what I have allowed for too long." The second egg split open. A pale silver claw pushed through. Then a small head emerged, black and gray and dusted with ash. The hatchling gasped once, too weak to climb free. Its wings stuck to the broken shell. Its body shook, as if even breathing was a battle. Ashara felt its pain strike through her palm. Without thinking, she moved toward it. Kael did not stop her. Vaelor did. Not with his hands, but with his voice. "Touch that egg, and you bind yourself to all of them." Ashara stopped. Every dead egg in the hole trembled. Vaelor's smile returned, thin and cruel. That is what ash blood does. It does not hatch one dragon and walk away. It answers every egg the crown silenced, every buried flame, every stolen life. You think this is power, girl? It is hunger with wings. They will need you, drain you, follow you. And when you cannot save them all, this court will call you murderer instead of miracle. The words hit where fear already lived. Ashara looked at the rows of dead eggs, at the cracked shells glowing faintly in their silver bowls. Too many. Far too many. She had been bought as blood for one vault. Now, the whole hall had become a grave waking around her. The first hatchling pressed its head beneath her chin. Small, trusting, Ashara closed her eyes for one breath. Then she opened them and walked to the second egg. "If needing me makes them dangerous," she said, "then what does using them make you?" Vaelor's jaw tightened. Ashara placed her bleeding palm against the broken shell. The second hatchling shuddered. White ash fire moved from Ashara's hand into its tiny chest. Its breathing steadied. It climbed free and stumbled into her lap, pressing against the first hatchling, as if they had been waiting 1,000 years to find each other. The court exhaled as one, not in relief, in fear. Kael stood above Vaelor, with his blade still drawn, but his eyes were on Ashara. She saw shock there, yes. Suspicion too, but beneath both was something harder for her to bear. Wonder. She looked away first. Wonder was dangerous when it came from kings. The ghost of Queen Eleanor hovered over the open vault, her ash-lit face dimming with every moment she remained. "They are waking because the keeper returned," she said, "but they will not survive in this hole." Kael turned to her. "Where must they go?" "The Ember Nursery beneath the eastern mountain, the place Vaelor sealed after my death." Vaelor laughed bitterly. "A ruin." Eleanor's eyes burned. "A sanctuary." Ashara looked up. "How far?" "Below the old dragon stairs," the queen said. "But the path opens only for blood freely given." Vaelor seized the opening instantly. "There, you hear it? More blood, more sacrifice. That is what she brings." Ashara looked at the hatchlings trembling in her arms, then at Kael. He was watching her too closely, as if ready to step between her and whatever the queen asked next. But she had learned to distrust protection that began after purchase. "You bought me for blood," she said. Kael's face tightened. "Yes, and if I give it now, will this court say I chose? Or will they say the Dragon King found a prettier way to cut me?" The question struck the hall silent. Kael lowered his sword from Vaelor's throat and turned fully toward her. "Then I will give mine first." Vaelor's eyes flashed. "Your Majesty." Kael sliced his palm across his own blade. Blood fell onto the black glass floor. The mountain answered. A deep rumble moved beneath the throne hall. The open vault glowed red, then white, then gold. Far behind the throne, stone doors that had been sealed for years began to grind apart, revealing a stairway descending into firelit dark. Ashara stared. Kael wrapped his bleeding hand in black cloth without ceremony. No one cuts you unless you choose the blade. The words should not have reached her. They did. The first hatchling crawled higher against her chest, staring at him with one white eye. The second curled against her arm. Both were warm, both alive, both impossible. Velor watched them with hatred barely contained. The court will not follow a king who lets dead eggs choose a wolfless girl over his crown. Kael looked at the nobles. Some stared at the hatchlings with awe, others with disgust, many with calculation already returning to their eyes. Power had a way of recovering quickly from shock. "You will follow no one tonight," Kael said. "You will witness." A noble lord stepped forward. "And if the eggs hatch into beasts loyal to her?" Ashara felt the old shame rise. Her. Always her. The problem, the danger, the excuse. Kael answered before she could. "Then perhaps loyalty is not what we should ask of newborn things." The hall went still again. Queen Eleanor's ghost looked at her son with something like sorrowful pride. Velor saw the court shifting and changed tactics. His voice dropped, controlled and poisoned. "Ask the girl what happened to her wolf." Ashara's body went cold. Kael's eyes moved to her. Velor smiled. "Did you never wonder why ash blood was hidden among wolves? Why every pack healer called her empty? Why no wolf answered beneath her skin?" He stepped closer to the court, raising his bound wrist enough for everyone to see. "Because ash, blood, keepers do not carry wolves. They carry the memory of the dragons their blood failed to save." The words hit Ashara like a blow. The eggs trembled. Velor pressed on. "Every hatchling she wakes will leave a scar inside her. Every dead shell will call. She is not a queen. She is a grave with hands." The hatchlings whimpered. Ashara looked down at them, heart breaking under the weight of too many staring eyes. Then a low sound filled the hall. Not from the eggs. From the open stairway. Something large moved in the darkness below. Kael lifted his sword. The court backed away. From the newly opened passage came a black dragon, not full-grown but far larger than the hatchlings, its body thin from hunger, its wings scarred, its golden eyes fixed on Ashara. Around its neck hung the broken remains of an old nursery chain. Velor went pale. Queen Eleanor whispered, "One survived." The young dragon limped into the throne hall, lowered its head before Ashara, and dropped something at her feet. A child's ash-gray blanket. Ashara stopped breathing. The same blanket from the vision, the one wrapped around the infant, carried away from the burning nursery. Kyle looked from the blanket to Ashara. Velor whispered, "Impossible." The young dragon pressed its scarred forehead to the floor. Not before the king, before her, and every cracked egg in the hall began to glow brighter. The young dragon bowed before Ashara, and the court forgot how to breathe. It was not as ancient as the dragons carved into the mountain walls, not as small as the hatchlings trembling in her arms. It stood between worlds, half-starved, scarred by old chains, its black scales dull from years without sky. One wing dragged slightly across the glass floor. Around its neck hung broken iron, the kind used not for ceremony, but imprisonment, and at Ashara's feet lay the ash-gray blanket from her own forgotten beginning. She stared at it until the throne hall blurred. The blanket was burned at one corner. A small crescent had been stitched into the cloth in faded silver thread. Ashara had seen it only in the vision. Wrapped around an infant carried away from a burning dragon nursery, hidden among wolves so no dragon court would find her. Her knees weakened. The first hatchling cried softly against her chest. The second curled tighter into the crook of her arm. The young dragon lifted its head and looked at her. "Not queen," it whispered into the hall. The word rippled through every noble and guard. Keeper. Ashara's breath broke. Velor stepped back, as if the word itself had struck him. Kale moved closer, but stopped before touching her. He had learned quickly, perhaps because the night had left him no pride to hide behind. Ashara, he said quietly. She could not answer. The young dragon's eyes shifted to him, sharp with warning. Kael lowered his sword slightly. I will not take her from you. The dragon's stare did not soften. Ashara found her voice at last. How long was he chained? No one answered. She looked at Velor. His face had recovered, but not fully. Fear still moved beneath the priest-regent's polished skin. How long? She asked again. Velor's voice was cold. Long enough to keep him from becoming a symbol, the young dragon snarled. The hatchlings in Ashara's arms answered with weak, furious sounds. Kael turned on his uncle. You knew a living dragon remained. I knew a dangerous relic survived your mother's treason. My mother saved him. Your mother doomed this court. Velor snapped. She wanted dragons to choose keepers again. She wanted ash, blood restored. She wanted the crown to ask permission from beasts and foundling girls before commanding fire. Ashara looked down at the blanket. Foundling girl. The words should have hurt. They had always hurt. But now, they sounded smaller. She had not been abandoned because she was worthless. She had been hidden because someone wanted her alive. That did not heal. The years of hunger, the wolf pack humiliation, the nights spent wondering why no beast answered beneath her skin. But it changed the shape of the wound. She was not empty. She was buried. The young dragon stepped closer and lowered its scarred head to the hatchlings. They reached for him. A soft sound moved through the court, wonder from some, fear from others. The young dragon touched each hatchling gently with his muzzle, then looked back at Ashara. The nursery waits. The open stairway behind the throne breathed warm ash. Queen Eleanor's ghost was fading above the vault, her form thinning into smoke and light. Take them below, she whispered, before the exposed court begins choosing sides. Kael looked toward the nobles. Too late. They were already doing it. Some backed toward the exits. Some whispered behind jeweled hands. Some stared at the hatchlings, as if calculating what a living dragon might be worth. The wolf envoys looked terrified, but not innocent. They had sold Ashara because someone had told them she mattered. They had not known the whole truth, perhaps, but they had known enough to profit from her silence. Velor saw the shift, too. His voice rose. If she enters the Ember Nursery with those hatchlings, the old bonds awaken. The dragons will not answer the crown. They will answer her. Ashara felt every eye turn. Again, the same trap. Not girl. Threat. Not survivor. Weapon. Kael stepped beside her, not in front. Then, perhaps the crown should ask, why living creatures feared it enough to choose anyone else? The words struck the hall hard. Velor's mouth tightened. You would dismantle 1,000 years of Draven rule for a girl bought in a wolf market? Kael's eyes flashed. I would know what my rule was built upon before I call it worthy. The young dragon rumbled softly. Ashara looked at Kael then, really looked. The king who had bought her, the man who had almost let her be cut deeper for a vault right. The son, hearing his mother's murder, sung from under his own throne. There was danger in him still. There always would be. But beneath it now was something harder than attraction, more frightening than pity. He was listening. Velor knew listening was the beginning of his defeat. He turned suddenly to the wolf envoys. Take her. The command cracked through the hall. 3 wolf guards lunged toward Ashara. The young dragon moved. So did Kael. But Ashara moved first. She turned her body around the hatchlings, lifted her bleeding palm, and the ash in her blood answered. White fire burst from the floor between her and the attackers, not hot enough to burn flesh, but bright enough to drive them back. The wolf guards crashed to their knees, choking on smoke. In the firelight, hidden marks appeared across their wrists. Ashara stared. They wore the same burned crescent that had been stitched into her blanket. Kale saw it too. "What is that?" One envoy tried to hide his hand. The young dragon snarled. Queen Eliano's fading voice whispered, "The mark of those paid to hunt ash-blood children." The court erupted. Ashara went cold from the inside out. The wolf pack that raised her had not merely hidden her. Someone among them had watched her for years, waiting, testing, keeping her powerless until Velor needed her blood. Velor's face darkened. Enough. He lifted both hands, and the black gold chains around the central egg altar rose like serpents. Kael stepped forward, sword ready, but the chains did not strike him. They shot toward the hatchlings. Ashara twisted away, but one chain wrapped around the second hatchling's wing. The tiny dragon screamed. The young dragon roared. Kael slashed through one chain, but another rose, glowing with old binding runes. Velor's voice thundered over the chaos. The hatchlings belong to the crown. Ashara's fear snapped into something fierce. "No," she said. The fire around her changed from white to ash gold. She set both hatchlings carefully behind the young dragon, then stepped toward Velor. Her whole body shook. She had no sword, no throne, no wolf, only blood, grief, and a fire she did not yet understand. But when she spoke, every dead egg in the hall glowed in answer. They belonged to themselves. The chains froze. The court froze. Even Kael turned toward her, stunned. Ashara pressed her bloody palm to the black glass floor. The mark beneath her skin opened like an ember becoming an eye. Across the hall, every silver bowl cracked. Every dead shell trembled. Every buried life answered. And from the open ember nursery stairway below, dozens of tiny dragon cries rose into the throne hall. Dozens of tiny dragon cries rose from beneath the throne hall. The sound was not powerful. That made it worse. It was small, broken, and alive. Too many fragile voices waking in the dark after years of silence. The court froze as the cries echoed from the open ember nursery stairway, rising through the mountain like grief learning how to breathe again. Ashara kept her bloody palm pressed to the black glass floor. The ash-gold fire beneath her hand spread in a circle, not burning the court, not touching the nobles, only reaching toward the dead eggs in their silver bowls. One by one, the bowls cracked. The gold chains around the altar trembled. The hatchlings behind the young dragon cried louder, answering the voices below. Velor's face turned white with fury. "Stop her." No one moved. He turned to the guards. "I said stop her." Still, no one moved, because every guard in the hall could hear them now. Not monsters, not weapons, not royal property. Babies, hatchlings, living creatures buried beneath a palace that had displayed their siblings as dead trophies. Kael stood beside Ashara, sword in hand, his face dark with controlled rage. "How many?" Velor did not answer. Kael's voice dropped. "How many hatchlings are beneath my throne?" Velor smiled, but it shook at the edges. "Enough to end your crown if she reaches them." Ashara looked up. Her hand still burned against the floor. Her body felt weak from blood loss and fire, but anger held her upright. "You kept them alive?" Velor's eyes cut to her. "I preserved what the crown required." "No," she said. "You starved them until they could be used." The young dragon snarled, placing himself between the hatchlings and the court. The ash-gray blanket remained near Ashara's knee, a small, ruined thing that suddenly felt heavier than any crown in the hall. Kael stepped toward Velor. The regent priest raised one hand, and the black gold chains around the altar snapped upward again. This time they struck the floor between Kael and Ashara, forming a wall of burning runes. "Do not mistake grief for authority," Velor said. "You are king because men like me kept the old fire buried." Kael's sword hit the chain wall. Sparks burst. The barrier held. Ashara felt the hatchlings below crying harder. They were afraid. That cut through everything. Through the court, through the king, through the years of being called empty. She knew that fear. The fear of hearing powerful footsteps and knowing they were coming for you. The fear of being useful to people who never saw you as alive. She stood slowly. The fire circle rose with her. Kael looked at her through the chain wall. "Ashara," his voice was rough with warning. She shook her head. "No, not this time." Velor turned toward her. "You cannot save them. That is the curse of your blood. It answers every dying flame and leaves you hollow." "I was already called hollow." The word silenced him. Ashara stepped toward the open stairway. The young dragon moved with her. The two hatchlings stumbled behind him, weak but determined, their tiny wings dragging over the glass. Kael struck the chain wall again, trying to break through. But Velor's runes flared brighter. "Let her go," Velor said coldly. "Let the court watch ash. Blood become what it always becomes. A girl bleeding herself dry for beasts that will outlive her gratitude." Ashara stopped at the top of the stairs. Then she looked back at him. "You still think I am doing this because they need me?" Velor's eyes narrowed. Ashara looked at the hatchlings, then at the young dragon, then at the dead eggs glowing around the throne hall. "I am doing it because someone should have come when I cried." The word struck the hall like a bell. Even Kael went still. Ashara descended. The ember nursery below was not a nursery anymore. It was a prison. Rows of stone cradles lined the cavern walls, each one carved for a dragon egg, each one marked with old Draven fire symbols, now blackened and broken. Some cradles held cracked shells, some held ash, some held living hatchlings wrapped in binding chains, too heavy for their tiny bodies. Their scales were black, bronze, white, blue, red small flames, stolen before they could become sky. Ashara covered her mouth. The young dragon lowered his head beside her shoulder. "These are my siblings," he whispered. She turned to him, tears burning her eyes. "What is your name?" The dragon blinked once. For a moment he looked almost afraid. Names had power. Names could be used. Names could be stolen. Ashara waited. At last, he whispered, "Rhine." The moment the name entered the air, the chain around his neck cracked. Not fully, but enough for him to lift his head higher. Ashara understood. Names first. Not blood, not force. Namis. She stepped to the nearest chained hatchling, a tiny bronze creature trembling in its stone cradle. "What is your name?" she whispered. The hatchling pressed its head weakly against her fingers. No answer came. Too young, too starved, too afraid. Ashara's heart broke. "Then I will not name you for myself," she said. "I will wait until you can." The mark in her palm warmed. The chain around the hatchling loosened. Above, Velor shouted something. Then came the crash of steel. Kael was fighting through the barrier. Ashara moved faster. She did not break every chain. She touched each cradle and loosened only what trapped breath, only what kept wings pinned, only what kept tiny throats from crying. Not freedom into chaos. Not a command. A first mercy. The nursery filled with soft cries. Then Velor's voice rang through the cavern. "Enough." Ashara turned. He stood at the top of the stairs, one hand bleeding onto a black rune stone. Behind him, the chain wall had shattered, but Kael was on one knee, held down by burning gold links wrapped around his sword arm and throat. Velor smiled down at her. "The king for the hatchlings," he said. "Choose ash, blood, girl." Ashara's breath stopped. Kale strained against the chains, eyes locked on hers. Do not. Vela pressed the rune harder. The chains tightened around Kale's throat. The hatchlings cried behind her. Ashara looked at the king who had bought her, then at the children buried beneath his throne, and the fire in her blood went cold. No, she whispered. Velor's smile faded. Ashara lifted her marked palm. I choose witness. Every cradle in the ember nursery ignited with ash gold light. Every cradle in the ember nursery ignited with ash gold light. Not fire. Witness. The light rose from the stone cradles in thin, bright lines, connecting hatchling to shell, shell to chain, chain to rune, rune to the black mountain above. For one breath, the entire nursery became a living record. Every hidden mark Velor had carved into the eggs burned visible. Every restraint placed on a dragon too young to defend itself flared in the air. Every blood transfer, every false death record, every stolen flame answered Ashara's command. The court above saw it too. The throne hall ceiling turned transparent with ashlight, and the nobles looking down from the broken floor saw the nursery beneath their feet. They saw the hatchlings chained in stone cradles. They saw Kael on one knee, gold links wrapped around his throat. They saw Velor standing at the stairs with one bleeding hand on the rune stone, forcing the king to kneel while demanding Ashara choose who deserved to live. No one could call it rumor. No one could call it ash blood corruption. They saw. Velor understood a heartbeat too late. His face changed from triumph to fury. Close your eyes, he shouted to the court above. Do not look into witness fire. But the ash gold light had already touched the mountain. Queen Eleanor's lullaby rose again from the open vault, no longer soft now, no longer hidden beneath stone. It filled the nursery, the throne hall, the broken altar, and the dead eggs that were not dead at all. Kael strained against the chains, his face darkening as the gold links tightened at his throat. Ashara, he forced out. The hatchlings. She looked at him. He was telling her to choose them over him. That should have made the decision easier. It did not. Because the king had bought her, yes, he had let the right begin. But he had also given his blood before asking for hers. He had stopped spears. He had listened when every law in his court told him not to. And now he was kneeling in the same kind of chain his throne had used on things smaller than itself. Ashara looked at the hatchlings behind her. Rain stood protectively before them, thin body shaking, broken chain still hanging from his neck. The two newborn dragons from the hall huddled near his legs, too young to understand why the mountain had become a battlefield. Velor smiled through clenched teeth. You cannot save both. Ashara looked at him. That is what men like you say when you build the knife. She stepped away from the cradles. Velor's smile widened. Then Ashara placed her bleeding palm on the nursery floor. Not on a hatchling, not on Kael's chain, on the mountain itself. I do not choose who gets to live, she whispered. I choose what must be seen. The ash gold light spread downward. The entire ember nursery answered. Stone cracked open beneath the rune marks. Not violently, precisely, like doors unsealing one after another. The chains around the hatchlings loosened. The gold links around Kael's throat flickered. Velor's rune stone began to burn beneath his hand. His smile vanished. No. Ashara lifted her eyes. Names first. Rain stepped forward, wings trembling. Rain, he said into the nursery, louder this time. His chain broke fully. The bronze hatchling in the nearest cradle lifted its tiny head. It could not speak yet, but its eyes opened, bright and alive. The chain around its throat fell loose. Another hatchling cried, then another. Not names yet, but breath. Enough for the mountain to know they were no longer objects in a sealed record. Kael dragged one hand under the chain at his throat, and pulled in a harsh breath. Velor ripped his bleeding hand away from the rune stone, but the fire followed him. Ashara stood. The ash-gold light moved through her like pain wearing purpose. It burned along her birthmarks, up her arms, across her throat. She nearly fell, but Rain pressed his scarred head against her shoulder, holding her upright with the gentleness of something too wounded to be gentle easily. Velor backed up the stairs. "Do you think they will thank you? They will need you until nothing remains." "Maybe," Ashara said. The words tasted like blood. "But needing me is not the same as owning me." Kael heard that. Even chained, bleeding, half-strangled, he heard it. His pale gold eyes locked on hers, and something in him shifted from fear to decision. He drove his own sword through the chain at his throat. The blade cracked. So did the chain. Blood ran down his neck as he rose. Velor turned to flee. Kael caught him at the stair mouth and slammed him against the black stone wall. The impact shook ash from the ceiling. For a moment, the Dragon King's hand closed around his uncle's throat, and every living thing in the nursery felt how easily he could end it. Ashara did not stop him. Not at first. Velor deserved the fear. But when Kael's grip tightened, the hatchlings began to cry. Kael heard them. His hand opened before Ashara spoke. That was the difference. He released Velor not because someone pleaded mercy from him, but because the children below his throne were afraid of kings who killed in front of them. Velor slid to the floor, coughing. Kael looked down at him. "You will live long enough to name every egg." Velor spat blood. "You will lose the throne." Kael's voice was quiet. "Then I will learn what remains of me without it." The words moved through the nursery like a second crack opening in the old world. Above them, the court had fallen silent. Ashara climbed the stairs slowly with Rain at her side and the hatchlings behind her. Kael followed with Velor, bound in broken gold chain. When they entered the throne hall again, the nobles backed away as if the wolfless girl from the border market had returned carrying a storm under her skin. She looked at the altar, where her blood had first fallen, then at the cracked eggs glowing in their silver bowls, then at the court that had watched her kneel. "I am not your key," she said. The hatchlings cried softly behind her. "I am not your vault blood. I am not your sacrifice. I am not the grave your dead eggs were waiting to drain." Her voice shook. She did not hide it. "I am Ashara Vale, and whatever wakes tonight wakes by choice, or it does not wake through me." The first newborn dragon climbed clumsily from behind Rain and stood at her feet, small wings open, hissing at the court with more courage than strength. A sound passed through the hall. Not laughter, not yet reverence. Fear, wonder, the beginning of belief. Then, the largest dead egg, the one still resting in the central altar, split fully in half. Inside was no hatchling, only a crown made of ash-black shell and white flame. Queen Eleanor's voice whispered through the hall one last time. "Not crown, witness." And every dragon egg in Dravenfall bowed its flame toward Ashara. The ash-flame crown hovered above the broken altar, and no one in Dravenfall dared reach for it. Not the nobles who had spent their lives bowing to power. Not the wolf envoys who had sold Ashara as if her blood were a coin. Not the guards who had held spears over hatchlings and called it duty. Even Kael Draven, born beneath dragon banners and raised to believe every flame in the mountain answered his crown, stood still with his wounded hand at his side, because the crown was not calling him. It burned above the altar, made from ash-black shell and white fire, its edges shifting like wings in slow motion. Every egg in the hall bowed its glow toward Ashara. The hatchlings gathered at her feet. Ryan stood behind her, scarred neck lifted, broken chain hanging uselessly from him now. "Witness." The queen's final word still moved through the air. Velor, bound in gold chain, laughed from the floor. It was not a strong laugh. Blood darkened his mouth, but hatred kept him upright. There it is. The trap your mother died for. Put it on her head and watch the court tear itself apart. Ashara looked at the crown. For one heartbeat, she imagined what the court saw. A wolfless market girl, bought for blood, now standing before a crown no Draven king could command. The image was absurd enough to make her want to step back. She had never wanted a throne. She had wanted a blanket in winter, food without humiliation, a name spoken without contempt. Kael looked at her, and she felt the danger of his attention again. Not hunger, not ownership, but something almost worse. Hope. Do not, Ashara said quietly. His brow tightened. I said nothing. You were thinking like a king. That struck him. Good. Ashara stepped toward the altar. The hatchlings whimpered, but she lifted one hand to calm them. The crown dipped toward her, as if eager to be worn. She did not touch it. I will not put on a crown made from dead shells, she said. The court stirred. Velor's smile faded. Ashara's voice grew steadier. I will not become the pretty answer to what you all allowed. If I wear it, you will call the hatchlings mine, the eggs mine, the blame mine. You will turn witness into rule, because rule is the only language you understand. The crown flared, not in anger, in recognition. Kael lowered his head slightly. Then what do you choose? She looked at him. Not you. The words cut through the hall. Several nobles gasped. Kael did not move. Ashara continued. Because if she stopped now, fear would take the shape of silence again. Not the throne. Not Valar's laws. Not the wolf packs that sold me. Not any bond that begins with a blade at my palm. Rain rumbled behind her. Ashara looked at the crown. I choose the eggs being named before they are claimed. I choose the hatchlings being fed before they are trained. I choose every sealed nursery opened before anyone speaks of loyalty. The ash-flame crown broke apart. Nobles cried out as pieces of white fire scattered across the hall, but they did not burn the floor. They flew to the cracked eggs, one spark to each shell, not crowning Ashara, but marking every unborn dragon as living witness. Velor stared, horrified. What have you done? Ashara turned to him, refused the trap. Kael's mouth tightened, almost with admiration, almost with grief. The council will not accept this. Then make them look at the nursery before they speak. Velor lifted his head. They will call her dangerous. Kael looked down at him. She is dangerous. Not because she wants power, but because she makes power answer questions. The court fell silent. This time, Ashara did not look away from the Dragon King. Something had changed between them, but it was not love. Not yet. Love would have been too easy a word for a night built from purchase, blood, and buried children. What lived between them now was sharper, recognition, restraint, and the terrible beginning of trust neither of them was ready to name. Then the wolf envoys moved, only 3 steps, toward the doors. Reinsnadel. Kael turned. Seal the hall. The black iron doors slammed shut before the envoys reached them. Guards crossed spears in front of the exits. The lead envoy raised his hands. Your Majesty, we only delivered what was requested. Ashara faced him. You watched me grow up. The man's eyes flicked away. You knew about the birthmarks, she said. You knew I was not simply wolfless. He swallowed. We were ordered to report if ash signs awakened. By whom? No answer. Ashara stepped closer. The hatchlings tried to follow, but rain kept them back with one wing. By whom? She asked again. The envoy's eyes went to Velor. The hall saw it. Velor closed his eyes briefly. Kael's voice turned cold. How long have you been hunting ash? blood children for my uncle. The envoy fell to his knees. We were paid to watch, not hunt. Rain growled. The younger hatchlings hissed. Ashara felt anger rise so quickly it nearly became fire. You let them call me empty. You let them sell me. The envoy bowed his head lower. Yes, that yes hurt more than denial, because it was small, ugly, human, not a prophecy, not a great cosmic evil. Just a man paid enough to ignore a child's suffering. KL stepped beside Ashara. Every envoy involved will be held for witness. The wolf envoy looked up in panic. The southern Pax will call this imprisonment. Kale's eyes did not soften. Then they can come explain why they priced an ash-blood girl like livestock. Before anyone could answer, the mountain shook. A horn sounded beyond the sealed doors. Then another, not Draven horns, wolf horns. The court stiffened. The lead envoy's face changed. Not fear, expectation. Velor smiled from the floor. Ashara's blood went cold. Kale turned slowly toward him. What have you done? Velor's smile widened. You thought the wolf pack sold her and left? No, nephew. They came to collect what hatches. Outside, the horns grew louder. The hatchlings cried. Rain spread his scarred wings over them. Ashara looked toward the sealed doors. As shadows moved beyond the iron, Velor whispered, Choose quickly, Ashkeeper. The wolves want the girl they buried. The court wants the dragons she woke, and the king cannot protect both. Without becoming the monster they already fear. Kael drew his sword. Ashara lifted her burning hand. The doors began to buckle inward, and behind her, every newborn dragon opened its eyes. The iron doors buckled inward. One blow, then another. Each impact shook the throne hall hard enough to send ash drifting from the dragon banners above. Nobles scattered from the entrance. Guards formed a line before the doors, spears raised, faces pale under the black-gold light of the awakened eggs. Behind Ashara, the newborn dragons cried in frightened, broken sounds, and Rain spread his scarred wings wider over them. Ashara stood barefoot beside the cracked altar, one hand still bleeding, the ash-blood mark burning up her wrist like a living ember. Kael Draven stood beside her with his sword drawn. Not in front of her, beside. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Velor watched them from the floor, bound in broken gold chain, smiling as if the mountain had finally begun playing the song he preferred. Listen to them, he said softly. The wolves always come when blood is in the air. The doors cracked. A blade pushed through from outside. Kael's guards braced. Ashara looked at the wolf envoy kneeling nearby. Who leads them? The envoy swallowed. High Alpha Rovan Mar. The name moved through the court like a cold hand. Kael's eyes narrowed. Mar controls the southern war packs. Velor's smile deepened. And now he controls the story. A wolfless girl sold to the Dragon King awakens forbidden eggs. The Dragon Court shelters her. The mountain fills with beasts. What do you think the wolf packs will call that? Ashara answered before Kael could. An excuse. Vailor's eyes flicker. They came before they knew what happened. She said, They did not come because I woke dragons. They came because you told them to wait. The doors split wider. Wolf soldiers forced their way into the hall with shields of dark iron and crescent blades. Their armor was gray-white, marked with ash-smeared wolf sigils. At their center walked a man with silver hair braided over one shoulder and a wolf-bone crown across his brow. High Alpha Rovan Mar. His gaze swept the throne hall, the cracked altar, the glowing eggs, the hatchlings behind Rain, Velor bound in chains, and Ashara standing at the center with fire in her blood. Then he smiled. There she is, Rovan said. The little ash ghost. Ashara's stomach turned. He knew her, not as rumor, not as tribute, as something already counted. Kael stepped forward. You enter Dravenfall armed. Rovan looked at him with calm contempt. You bought wolf property. We came to reclaim it. The hall went deadly still. Ashara felt the words strike somewhere old and bruised. Property. Not girl. Not keeper. Not witness. Property. Kael's sword lifted slightly. Say that again. Rovan's smile did not change. The girl was raised under wolf law. Her blood was marked for transfer long before your coin changed hands. Ashara looked at the envoy who had delivered her. He would not meet her eyes. Rovan turned his attention to her. Come here, child. You have caused enough trouble. A strange quiet settled inside Ashara. All her life, commands had entered her body before thought. Stand, kneel, bleed, be still, be grateful. Come here. That old obedience rose now out of habit, worn smooth by years of survival. Then one of the hatchlings cried behind her. Ashara did not move. Rovan's eyes hardened. Do not mistake borrowed fire for freedom. Rain growled. The newborn dragons hissed from beneath his wing. Rovan glanced at them. Kill the older one. Take the hatchlings alive. Kael moved like a blade leaving its sheath. The hall erupted. Dragon guards clashed with wolf soldiers at the broken doors. Steel rang against iron. Nobles screamed and fled toward the galleries. Ryan lunged to shield the hatchlings, as wolf hunters rushed the altar with hooked chains meant for small throats and wings. Kael cut through the first line with terrifying precision, but there were too many. Ashara saw a hunter slip past the guards toward the smallest hatchling. She did not think. She ran. The hunter raised a hooked chain. Ashara threw herself between him and the baby dragon. The chain struck her shoulder, tearing through her dress and skin. Pain flashed white. The hatchling shrieked. Kael shouted her name. Ashara caught the chain with her bleeding hand. The metal burned cold. Rovan's voice rang across the chaos. Do not kill her. Her blood opens the eggs. There it was. The truth, spoken carelessly in battle. Ashara turned toward him, chain still cutting her palm. That is all I ever was to you? Rovan looked almost bored. You were hidden for a purpose. Hidden? Preserved, he corrected. Your pack was paid to keep you weak, not dead. A useful mercy. The chain in Ashara's hand began to glow. Kael froze where he stood, blood on his sword, fury sharpening every line of his face. Ashara looked at the wolf soldiers, the dragon court, the eggs, the hatchlings, the king, the uncle, the men who had bought her, sold her, hunted her, preserved her, and called each version of control by a better name. No, she whispered. The chain melted in her palm. Ash gold fire spread across the floor. Not wild, precise. It circled the hatchlings first, forming a low wall no wolf blade could cross. Then it reached the cracked eggs, shielding each silver bowl. Then it moved toward Rovan's boots. He stepped back. For the first time, his smile faded. Ashara walked toward him. The battle slowed around her. Ryan followed, limping but fierce. Kael moved at her side, not stopping her, not commanding her, only cutting down any soldier who tried to reach her. Rovan lifted his blade. You think dragons make you brave? Ashara stopped before him. Her shoulder bled. Her palm burned. Her voice shook, but every word carried. No. Being treated like property taught me what owners fear. The ash fire climbed Rovan's blade. He dropped it with a curse. Ashara pointed at the wolf envoys. You watched me starve, then at Velor. You bought me to bleed, then at the dragon nobles. You watched because the knife was not at your palm. Her eyes returned to Rovan. All of you thought I was safest when I believed I was nothing. The eggs behind her pulsed with white fire. The newborn dragons went silent, listening. Ashara lifted her marked hand. I am not nothing. The floor beneath Roven cracked open, revealing old wolf runes buried under dragonstone. Transfer marks, watcher oaths, blood sale contracts, payments from Valor to the southern packs, names of ashblood children who had vanished before Ashara. The court saw. The wolf soldiers saw. Some lowered their weapons. Roven's face twisted. Lies. Kael's voice cut through the hall. Then swear before blood and flame that your packs did not sell children to my uncle. Roven said nothing. That silence broke the southern line more cleanly than steel. Rain stepped beside Ashara and lowered his scarred head. Keeper, he said, into every mind in the hall. Not property. The hatchlings answered in small, fierce cries. Kael looked at Ashara, then turned to the court and wolf soldiers alike. High Alpha Roven Mar entered Dravenfall under arms to seize living dragons and reclaim a girl his pack sold under false blood law. He will stand witness trial with Valor Sith. Roven laughed suddenly. You think a trial will stop war? No, Ashara said. Everyone looked at her. She looked toward the broken doors, where more wolf soldiers waited beyond the threshold. Uncertain now, caught between orders and the truth burning under their feet. But hiding the truth started one. The ash fire rose behind her, like wings. The largest cracked egg on the altar trembled. A sound came from inside, deep, older than the hatchlings, older than the court. Valor's face went white. Roven stepped back. Kael turned slowly toward the egg. The shell split open, not with a baby's cry, but with a roar that shook the mountain, and from inside the supposedly dead royal egg, a dragon voice thundered. Who sold my keeper? The royal egg had no body left to hatch, only a voice. It thundered through Dravenfall from inside the broken shell, shaking the black mountain, bending every flame in the throne hall toward the altar. The newborn dragons went silent. Rhine lowered his scarred head. Even Kael Draven, dragon king of a court built on fire and fear, stood motionless as the ancient voice filled the chamber. Who sold my keeper? No one answered. The question was not asked once. It rolled again through the mountain, deeper this time, reaching the wolf soldiers at the doors, the nobles in the galleries, the guards gripping their weapons with white-knuckled fear. Who sold my keeper? High Alpha Roven Mar stepped back from the cracked floor. Valor Sith, still bound in broken gold chain, shut his eyes. Ashara understood then. The royal egg had not hatched into a dragon, because the dragon inside had died long ago, but its fire had not vanished. Its memory remained inside the shell, waiting for Ashblood to wake it, waiting not to be owned, not to be crowned, but to ask the question no court wanted answered. Ashara stood with blood on her palm and shoulder, hatchlings sheltered behind her, and looked at the men who had shaped her life without ever seeing her as alive. The wolf pack sold me, she said. Roven's eyes flashed. You were raised under our law. No, Ashara said. I was hidden under your law, watched under your law, starved under your law, sold under your law. The ash fire around her feet brightened. The royal egg's broken shell pulsed. And who bought you? The court turned toward Valor. Kyle did too. Valor lifted his chin with the last of his pride. I bought what was necessary to protect Dravenfall. Ashara looked at him. You bought a child who had already been buried once. You are not a child now. No, she said, because you waited until my blood was useful. The words struck harder than fire. Rovan snarled. Enough. The girl is poisoning both courts. The royal egg answered. The black glass floor became a mirror of flame. Images rose beneath everyone's feet. Wolf elders receiving black gold from Valor's agents. Pack healers cutting Ashara's skin under full moons, not to help her shift, but to see whether ashlight would appear. Children with ash-gray birthmarks taken from border villages and never returned. Queen Eleanor hiding the last living hatchling, hiding Ashara dying with a blade in her back, while Velor sealed the eggs and rewrote mercy as treason. The wolf soldiers watched. Some lowered their blades. A young wolf guard whispered, "My sister had marks like that." Another turned toward Rovan. "You told us. Ash blood children were sickness." Rovan rounded on him. "Hold your line." But the line was already breaking. Truth did not always win quickly. Sometimes it only made obedience hesitate. That hesitation was enough. Kael stepped forward. "Rovan Mar and Velor Sith will stand trial before wolf and dragon witness." Rovan laughed without humor. "A trial? You think the southern packs will accept your court's judgment?" "No," Kael said. "That is why it will not be only my court." He turned to Ashara, not for permission to use her, for confirmation. Ashara looked at the hatchlings, at Ryan, at the cracked eggs glowing in their bowls, at the wolf soldiers whose certainty had begun to rot. Then she looked at Kael, the king who had bought her, the man who had listened too late, but listened, the ruler standing now beside the girl his court had meant to drain. "Every egg named," she said. "Every ash, blood child, recorded. Every pack that took gold answers publicly." Kael nodded. "Done." Velor's face twisted. "You cannot rebuild kingdoms on witness." Ashara looked down at him. "No, but you built one on silence, and it is already falling." Rovan lunged. Not at Kael, at Ashara. He moved with alpha speed, claws flashing from one hand, aiming for her throat before any guard could stop him. Kael turned, but Ashara saw the strike first. So did Rhine. So did the newborn dragons behind her. But the royal egg moved faster than all of them. White ash fire erupted from the broken shell, not burning Rovan's body, but freezing him in place, with his claws inches from Ashara's skin. His eyes went wide. Every hidden blood oath under his flesh lit at once. Contracts, sales, watcher marks, payments, names. The ancient voice spoke again. Not owner, not alpha, thief. Rovan collapsed to his knees. His own soldiers did not catch him. Velor stared at the royal egg with open terror now. "Dead things should stay dead." Ashara stepped toward him. "Then why did you keep their shells?" He had no answer. Good. Some silences deserved to be left visible. By noon, the throne hall of Dravenfall was no longer a court. It was a witness chamber. Scribes filled the floor. Wolf soldiers laid down weapons and gave names. Dragon guards opened the lower nurseries. The silver bowls were removed from the dead eggs, not as trophies, but as evidence. Rain stood at the stairway, watching every hatchling carried from the dark into warmth. No one touched them without asking Ashara first, and Ashara asked the dragons with every gesture. Not all could be saved. That truth came quietly, and hurt more than battle. Some eggs had only memory left. Some shells glowed once, then dimmed forever. Some hatchlings breathed but did not wake. Ashara stayed with each one until the ash fire settled, refusing to let the court count losses as numbers. Every shell was named, if a name could be found. Every silence was recorded as a life stolen, not a failed asset. Kael did not sit on the throne, not once. He stood below it, wounded hand wrapped in black cloth, issuing orders that stripped power from the old council piece by piece. Velor was taken in iron, not gold, because gold had made too many crimes look royal. Rovan was bound under both wolf and dragon witness. The envoys who sold Ashara were detained until every payment, order, and child's name could be traced. At sunset, Ashara returned to the altar where her blood had first fallen. The ashes of the burned red cord still lay on the floor. The first hatchling climbed clumsily over her foot and curled against her ankle. The second slept against Rain's side. Above them, the broken royal shell no longer thundered. Its fire had softened into a steady white glow. Kael approached slowly and stopped several steps away. "You are free to leave Dravenfall," he said. Ashara looked at him. He did not flinch from what lived in her eyes. "Free?" she asked. "After being brought here?" His jaw tightened. "Yes, free under guard, under protection, if you ask for it, without it, if you do not. And the hatchlings? They are not mine to claim." That answer mattered. It did not heal everything, but it mattered. Ashara looked toward the Ember Nursery, where tiny dragon cries now rose not from fear, but hunger, warmth, and life. "I will stay until the nurseries are opened, until every egg is named, until every pack answers for the children it sold." Kael bowed his head. "And after?" She touched the ash-gray blanket Rain had brought her. The cloth was old, burned, and real. Proof that someone once tried to save her before the world learned how to use her. "After," she said, "you may ask me again." Kael's eyes softened with pain he did not ask her to soothe. "Then I will wait." Rain lowered his head behind Ashara, not to the king, but beside her. The hatchling at her feet opened one gold eye and chirped toward the dawn beyond the mountain windows. Outside, dragons rose over Dravenfall for the first time in generations. Not many, not yet. Some were hatchlings carried in careful arms. Some were only flames inside, cracked shells waiting for names. But the sky above the Black Mountain was no longer empty. Ashara Vale had entered the Dragon Court as a wolfless girl bought for her blood. By nightfall, a dead dragon egg had called her keeper. The buried hatchlings had cried her name, and the Dragon King's throne had learned the truth it feared most. No flame is holy if it must be chained.